Welcome to In the Kitchen, everybody. Thanks for being with us for another quarterback class. I'm Rocky Collis, co-founder, CEO of Mustard. I am not a quarterback, but I'm filling in tonight for my brother Luke, who you all have met on previous classes. And I'm going to do my best to pretend, even though I'm bringing a pitcher's mind to quarterbacking, which is a very, very dangerous proposition. We're thrilled tonight to have probably the person in the world whose best transition a pitching mind to a quarterback mind other than maybe Tom House. And that's Adam Dedeaux. Adam, thanks for doing this with us again.
Of course. Good to be here.
We got to start. We're going to talk about Swivel as a mechanical variable tonight for both, how it relates to pitchers and how it's different for quarterbacks. But we got to start with last week's draft. Adam Dedeaux with 3D QB. I was saying before we joined this call, Adam's got to be one of the few people in the history of the world that trained both the number 1 and the number 2 pick in the same draft, having trained both Bryce Young, I think since he was like 8 years old, and more recently CJ Stroud, and then both being taken number 1 and number 2. So Adam, first of all, congrats. And second, can we just talk a little bit generally for the young quarterbacks in this class? What are some things that, as you've observed Bryce and CJ over the years, what are like some common threads or things that you think young folks might take from those guys?
Yeah, I think about, we started with Bryce at a young age in middle school when he, I guess junior high, when he showed up here. And he was obviously really naturally gifted. And I think what I appreciated about him was he was really good at a young age, but he was still interested in these little details. He always wanted to leave with something. And I always thought that was an advanced approach for a young guy. Is the same thing we talk about with our veteran guys is, how do we get 1% better? And I think Bryce took that approach at a young age that while everything, he was very naturally gifted, I think he knew he was going to be undersized. So there was always this part of him that was like, I'm not going to have the margins that other guys might have. So, but it didn't slow him down. It didn't intimidate him. He just knew he had to find a way. And I think you find that with guys that maybe are undersized or don't possess the tools that really naturally good athletes have. He's a very smooth thrower and he's an incredibly gifted athlete, but I think for him, he really took ownership of the fact that he was going to make up for it in other ways. And you heard a lot of talk about in the draft about how his processing and his in processing, I mean like his ability to process defenses and identify coverage and knowing where to go with the football and anticipation. I think he really learned how to play the quarterback position, but that didn't happen by just magic. Like it was something he worked at. It was something that he spent time in the film room. And he did the little things throughout his career. It didn't just happen, by coincidence. This is something that, yes, we saw the natural talent with him, but his preparation and his attention to detail and his work ethic. This is a kid in high school that before school, he was showing up at the weight room to get his lifts in at 6 a.m. outside of school. Like, he was up at 5:30 in the morning. He wanted to get a throwing session in before school, and he wanted to talk about practice tape, like doing the little things and doing it at a young age. CJ, similarly, while his story is a little bit different, a guy that, man, always had and still has a chip on his shoulder, but it fuels him to get better. Both those guys got drafted on Thursday. They had to do their, appearances. They get flown to their team, yada, yada, yada. Huge long weekend. But where were they on Monday morning? Right back here, working out. And I'd be remiss without mentioning Taylor Kelly and John Beck, who obviously were huge in the development of those guys during the pre-draft process. And Taylor and Bryce is very unique relationship they have. But those two guys are right back there Monday morning, hammering out details of the new teams that they've just joined, playbooks in hand, wanting to go over nuance. CJ's in the office today. Hey, I want to get quizzed on this stuff. I got to start diving deep into this stuff. It speaks to there was no take a breath. I just got drafted and they're here Monday morning. They're here again today. They'll be here tomorrow. These things don't happen by accident. And I think for young quarterbacks, like, you want to be a quarterback, understand what you're getting yourself into. It is a eat, sleep, grind, but like, man, it can be so rewarding when you put in the time and effort for sure.
Well, and so much of that really relates to things we heard from Drew Brees in the first week of this quarterback course, talking about leadership and what it means to lead by example properly. It's the things you're talking about with Bryce and CJ. If we can, I want to link it to something that I heard you say, I think it was last week, where you're talking about Bryce and the
Yeah.
first time you saw him, how his face was relaxed when he
Yeah.
was throwing the deep ball. I think for young quarterbacks, there's like a really important lesson there, especially when linking it with work ethic. For me, when I was a young pitcher, I maybe similar to Bryce, only in that I knew I was going to be undersized and I needed to make up for that somehow as a pitcher. And I tried to make up for it with work ethic, but I also tried to make up for it with like effort in game, and that was tension, So
Yeah.
I was never a relaxed face guy, which was a big problem. Can you talk a little bit about sort of combining work ethic? You're working at something all the time, but then the confidence to when you're performing, you're totally relaxed and just letting your talents take over.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we saw in practice with him. And I think, you know, like you said, the working hard versus working smart. And, you know, there is that fine line, that fine balance. Of course, like, I know quarterbacks who were all about the strength and all about, how big and how strong and how hard and all that. And that's not necessarily, in some cases, that's the position. But no, it's about having that balance and understanding that, in the biggest moments, and that was kind of what we talked about just with Bryce. I took from the smallest thing of having a loose jaw when he's technically straining, to seeing him, take the team down the field against Texas, down late in the game, or I think it was Auburn or one other, a couple of games where he just looked the same way. It was very cool, calm, and collective. um and yes, part of that is his demeanor, but I also think that's something he works on.
Mm.
I think that's something that, like, you talk about how you can control emotion and how you can control your body, how to relax. There's all sorts of techniques for that, which I'm sure Jason has probably talked about, because in the golf world, it's probably even more than ever. Um, but yeah, I mean, just something we saw early on with him, and he hasn't blinked since.
Hmm.
Pretty special.
Yeah, Jason's got class later tonight for those that want to learn more from him. But I do think it's amazing just listening to you talk and the relaxed jaw thing, the fine details that great coaches pick up, and that all of the rest of us can try to learn from you guys and apply to ourselves. It's pretty remarkable. What we're going to do now is just kind of recap some of the mechanical variables that we've gone through in previous sessions of this course, and then we'll get into Swivel and we'll talk about where we're going the rest of the course. So I think a lot of you, probably most of you, were on the initial class with Drew Brees, where we talked a lot about these work ethic, confidence, leadership issues. Then Sam Ellinger kind of went through the mechanical report card overall and how he uses the Mustard app. By the way, if any of you are not using the app yet, you want to get off the wait list, just email us info@teammustard.com. We'll get the football app into your hands. Adam did a mechanical overview of all the mechanical variables, and then we started going into the individual mechanical variables one by one. The first one we did was direction. Adam, maybe we could ask you to just do a 2-sentence recap of direction, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about, you kind of brought up you wanted to go over variables, and when you guys had sent me the list of what you wanted to go over, it was something that I was like pretty adamant we needed to add to the list, because our alignment and direction is basically, when we get to the top of drops, making sure that, in adjacent to where we're trying to throw the football, our alignment and our direction, our ability to achieve that, sets us up to have consistent quality mechanics. If your direction is all over the place, the chances of having efficient mechanics become dramatically less. So I thought it a very important point to talk about making sure our alignment is good and the strategies in which we find our direction at the top of drops, because it's one thing that when we're out on the field and we're coaching guys, it literally starts there. They could have good mechanics or bad mechanics after the fact, but if their direction's not good, it's the first thing we're going to go to to try to help correct something. So yeah, we talked about that week one, the importance of direction, how to find direction, and what are some like, focal points in terms of when you're actually, checking yourself in a workout.
Awesome. Direction, a great one that we don't really talk about for pitchers, but super important for quarterbacks. So glad we let off with that one. Relates directly to the next one you covered, which was footwork.
Yeah.
Maybe give a tiny bit more recap on what you mean by footwork.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our talk and footwork was going over just kind of the base footworks that are required for football from under center and in the gun. Some of it was a little remedial for those who play the position a lot, but moreover, the purpose of our footwork was talking about the nuance and the details within the footwork. What are the goals in terms of depth, and how do we control our tempo, and making sure at the top of drops that our base, we're getting to a good base, coming from under center, and understanding the details of within the footwork, how do we achieve direction, little tips and strategies. Again, something that like when CJ came back today, or he came back yesterday, today he didn't even want to throw. He just wanted to work footwork because he's got a new offense, new footwork, new directions, new things. And we didn't even touch a football today. It was all just about direction because I'm sorry, about footwork because he understood the importance of, I got to get this footwork being like it's breathing, right? I got to
Mhm.
have this. So I'm not thinking about it. It needs to be understood. I need to rep it. And we spent an hour on just footwork today.
And then that probably links with the next one, especially in a new offense, which is timing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we talked again, a mixture between the importance of timing as it pertains to offense and football. And then also, we kind of distinguish the difference between what we do as throwing coaches, as quarterback coaches, the timings we're looking for delivery's sake, much like the app is charting. When you decide when you're throwing a football and you start for first forward movement and those hands break, how fast and how quickly do we need to get rid of the football starting at the high school level, the college level, to the NFL. And we defined essentially, hey, we want to have that ball out in 0.43, 0.42 or less. High school, we can get away with 0.45 or less. So we were kind of distinguishing the differences between timing and anticipation as it pertains to routes and concepts, but then also just in the most micro sense, if you are training a quarterback or you're a quarterback yourself and you are looking at your delivery, what time frame would be where you're at now and then where you need to get to. And then also, if you're trying to quicken your delivery, what are some easy ways, what are some low hanging fruit that we can fix, like timing and the foot strike would be one, that is going to speed up our delivery. Because you ask anybody who's been in the league for a long time, they talk about fast and accurate. Get the ball out fast, be accurate, but timing and being efficient with those movements are so important in game for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so now we've got our direction, we've got our footwork, we've got our timing, and we start moving up the chain a little bit. And last week you talked about balance and posture.
Yeah. I mean, it's on the number one of Tom's regression analysis for a reason. It's something that we talk about constantly. And we talked about in the class, like also defining, when is most important to be balanced. And we kind of talked about, obviously at the top of drops, we want to be balanced on our base. When our foot strike happens, making sure our balance and where our weight should be. And then also as we weight shift and we we rotate our shoulders around, swivel the front side like we're going to talk about today. What are our balance points there? Making sure our head is staying over our front knee or just inside, never outside. You know, the purpose of balance through movement inside and outside of the pocket, balance throughout drops. I mean, so much of, you think about any rotational athlete, golfers, hitters, pitchers, quarterbacks, it all starts with some level of balance. Golfers talk about being repeatable, and they are in the same, ideally on a flat surface, they're finding that balance point to, like, the tiniest little bit, and then they find themselves on a slope, whatever. They're always searching for balance. They at least get to find that. With quarterbacks, it's like a moving target constantly. So being able to understand, and we kind of talked about like the duck and water analogy of like our feet are moving, but our upper body is staying as neutral as possible, no matter if we're getting moved inside or outside the pocket. Just how important staying in that, like we talked about finding that weightless environment where we're standing on our skeleton. We talked about that in the middle or the beginning of it. That's kind of defining where our balance points are, keeping that throughout our delivery, no matter what's thrown at us.
Awesome. Those are all the prior classes from this course. So for any of you that missed any of those are all in the video on demand section on the website, which you're already subscribed to. If you have any trouble finding them, just email us. We'll make sure you've got access to them. But I do think important to not just learn about one of the mechanical variables, but think about how they all link together. Adam used the term regression analysis. Things that are further up the chain of regression analysis, sometimes we call them chunkier teaches, right? You fix something further up the chain, it's going to fix a bunch of things down the chain. So let's make sure you're getting the full picture here. And it's really, using the application, we obviously think maybe we're biased, but we think will help you kind of get the full picture of what you need to learn mechanically, particularly on something like timing. If you're using the application consistently, you'd be able to see whether you're improving on timing over the course of time. Or whether it's something that's a little bit stagnant for you. So today, Swivel, I'm excited for. Little known fact, when we were naming the company, Adam, I wonder if you know this, Swivel was like, it came in second. Like we almost named the company Swivel instead of Mustard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. No, that's a
Yeah.
first.
It's both this physical mechanical variable and it's a mental thing that Jason teaches. Swivel from a bad focal point to a good one. Turned out that Justin Rose, our golfer, nixed the name because it's a swear word in England, which we didn't realize. So now we're Mustard and Swivel is just a mechanical variable. So we're going to look at it both from a baseball perspective and a football perspective, just to understand whether there's any differences. But I think this is like maybe one of the most famous Tom House mechanical variables ever, because it's something that he was so early on. And I think he was so early on it that at first it was controversial. And now it's not. But as we start to pull up a baseball video, could you just give us like a general definition in your mind of swivel?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to baseball and kind of where it originated. I know, when I got into the football world, it was still being taught, but kind of the general thought was that everybody was bringing the, as you swivel your glove, that you're bringing your glove to your chest. And what Tom was like, no, you need to see it in real time. Your chest is coming to your glove and it needs to be stable. It needs to be swiveled and stabilized right in front of your chest. And you bring your chest to your glove. Similarly, and moreover in football, one of the main teaches was, we were ripping the front side as a way of delivering the front arm. And then similarly in baseball, I mean, they were kind of misunderstanding, kind of what was going on. And we knew that to be true in baseball, at least I did, because I was coached by Tom House. It only made sense to me. But then I got into the football world and I realized one of the main teaches was we were just ripping that front side. We were breaking the glass. We were, slapping the wall, all this stuff. And I'm like, man, and I would watch guys attempt to be doing that. And, through motion analysis, we already knew it to be true that the front side had to be stable and swiveled in front. But yeah, that was a big thing being taught at the time. And then I was like, all right, let me just go ahead and pull up, call it 10 NFL quarterbacks throwing and just pay attention to the front side. Just so I'm not saying it's a confirmation bias. I just figured I would, really look at what was going on. And even when guys were trying to rip down, the front side would stop at release point, and then there'd be this active like pull. I was like, okay, the body wants to stop. It's telling you something. In order for direction and accuracy, to square your chest up at your target, swiveling that front side, keeping it in front. This is going to be a easy teach for quarterbacks once they feel the difference. So much like with pitchers, the glove's going to stay in front. It's a little different with pitchers because they have the weight of the glove. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
I think that answers it really well. I mean, I think for anybody in the class, if you just Google and get a picture of Tom Brady or Drew Brees or any elite quarterback, especially anybody trained by Tom or Adam at release point, the moment the ball's coming out of their hand, their front arm is right in front of their face. Tom talks a lot about eating the burger, and
Yeah.
man, Tom Brady looks like he's trying to eat a burger when he's at release point. And for sure, Adam, I was taught to, all the way out in front with the glove and then pull it as hard as I can.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going to talk about torque retention, and these variables are like one and the same in my mind, because if you're doing this, there's no possible way you can do torque retention properly. You're going to release your hip shoulder separation too early. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a way, but we're talking about very small margins. I'd say every once in a while, if you're ripping the front side, you may line it up perfectly, but and it might feel good. But I don't think that means anything for accuracy. I think that just might mean force output, and if it's timed up perfect. But that's not the point. The point is this is a much more efficient way of moving and moving accurately and supporting your throwing arm. Like it checks all the boxes as to what we're looking to do as throwers. And to your point, just to get into the details of for quarterbacks, we don't really care. I mean, the nature of the hand or whatever, and inside, I see open hand, I see closed hand, I see fingers, I see all sorts of different things. Everybody's a little different. Drew Brees was here, Tom Brady's here, Matt Ryan's here, Aaron Rodgers is limp like this. I mean, you go down the line, Russell Wilson is here. But the point is it's all inside the frame of your body. We don't really necessarily care the nature of the hand. I think a limper hand versus a stressed hand is better. That shows you're staying relaxed. But in general, I don't really care as long as it's staying inside the frame of your body. Ideally, chest or above. The lower it gets, the more chance our posture is going to start to suffer. This is just a good reminder to keep our chest up. Long as it's inside the frame of your body, that it's stopped and that it's passive at release point, that's what we're looking for.
So inside the frame, I want to make sure people have the tools to work on this at home. So inside of the frame of the body, if you're using the Mustard app, that is something we're measuring, and you can see if you're using the front facing angle, just at release point in that still frame or GIF at release point, is your wrist and your hand inside the four corners of your torso. And then what about from the side angle, Adam? So you remember they get a GIF of their release from the side angle too. So is there something they might look for in that wrist when they're looking at the side angle to see if they're doing this swivel and stabilize properly?
The side angle, I mean, for quarterbacks, it's going to be, if we're tracking properly, we should be closing the distance between our hand and our chest. We wouldn't want it way out in front. I would say that's an indication that we didn't track enough.
What about in relating, like sometimes I've seen Tom talk about, look at something in the background and you can tell whether you're pulling this glove to your chest or whether your chest is tracking to
yeah,
that.
for sure. Like if there's a whatever you would call that, where like you can relate based on the background, you can see that the hand is not moving and that the body's coming forward. For sure. It's a little harder with quarterbacks because they don't track nearly as far as pitchers do. It happens in a much smaller space. So from the side angle, I think, just making sure that it's you're not going to be able to necessarily see from the side angle whether or not it's perfectly inside the frame of your body. But I think just making sure the distance between your front side and your chest is not a huge amount, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So we're going to look at it now with Jose Barrios, just to start with a baseball example, and then we're going to shift to some football examples. But Cole, who's helping us with the video here, maybe we can just let it play until foot strike, and we'll start at foot strike. But I just want to tell people this has been reported, so I'm not breaking any news here. But Tom and our friends at the NPA spent a lot of time with Jose this offseason, and I think therefore it's no surprise Jose's been dominant in his last several starts. But one of the things they spent a lot of time working with Jose on is this front side. So we thought he'd be a cool example to show. And by the way, we're looking forward to doing some baseball classes with Jose too. But here's an example, Adam. Okay, so that's, I think, as far out towards home plate as his glove's going to get. And we can kind of look at something in the background, like you could take the letter C in that SFC athletics side and relate the glove to that. And let's maybe see what happens through release point. Maybe you can just tell us what you see with that front side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm looking at this right away, I mean, obviously he's kind of that, Tom would probably call him like an Andy Pettit type, where he's got that high front side that
Mm,
ends up dropping in a little bit lower. But at release point, you can see where the glove is right there, where he's working to try to keep it inside the frame of his body, again, close to his chest. I'd say, for the most part, he's trying like hell to to keep that thing in front. He's got the high front side down to a swivel and stabilize at release point. I mean, from the front side, I would say it's pretty close to being inside the frame of your body. The question is, how active is it? He's got an active front side that eventually starts to slow down, or if he's trying to. But yeah,
mm.
that is something for sure that, from an efficiency standpoint, accuracy standpoint, I can see where that would be a major emphasis for him.
And by the way, I was wrong. He got that glove all the way out to the A from the C.
Yeah.
But and so to your earlier point, this can look a variety of different ways. The hand can do different things, especially in a pitcher. It can be, Andy Pettit style, or it can, in a quarterback, it can be at different angles. But there is a major point here that for somebody that's throwing hard and efficiently, they're not pulling it back this way, right? Like once this
Right.
glove gets out level with the letter A in athletics, it's staying at that distance towards home plate. It's not then moving back towards the rubber.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, you can see where it has stopped.
right. And I think you're right that this is something that they found was a big possible area of improvement for Jose. By the way, who was already an all-star major league pitcher. So, for young quarterbacks in this class, thinking about this as an area to work on, there's always stuff like this to refine and work on. But for Jose, this is a big opportunity for improvement that I think he's capitalized on. Seems like with his efficiency kind of pitching, just like walks to strikeouts and improved accuracy so far this season, it's made a big difference for him. So in baseball, we've got kind of different ways this can look, but you're looking for something that's stable, not being pulled back, eventually stable within the four corners of the torso. Can we talk about differences for what that looks like for a quarterback? I assume you wouldn't have like an Andy Pettit style quarterback, for example. Like there's probably less variation in the front side for a quarterback. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, in this video, I think Andy's just doing straight jackets, but yeah, there's the teach of being up into foot strike, similar to how Andy Pettit would have done it as a way of delaying front shoulder rotation. Um, Still can be a teach for quarterbacks. Uh, but in general, those arms, for quarterbacks are trying to stay inside 90 when they start to when they separate their hands. There's not going to be as much movement, honestly, and it's happening in half the time. So the limbs are going to stay shorter, and it's gonna happen pretty quickly. The biggest thing, though, as to what makes an active or a passive front side in my mind is creating separation between hips and shoulders and allowing your hips to deliver your upper body efficiently.
Mm,
Then we don't feel the need to rip our front side. It's usually when we see guys, actively pulling, to me, I go right back to, okay, there's a rotational or a sequence issue, similar to maybe how a golfer might start his downswing too soon. If that front side, front shoulder, front hand is really active, I'm going right to their torque. Like, how can I make their rotation more efficient? Usually it's going to start with movement patterns. Well, first of all, conditioning the body to do the movement, then getting that movement sequenced up properly. So it's not just, hey, we need to create torque and then, the front side will stabilize. No, it is condition the body first for that movement, then work on the movement pattern itself, and then learn how to rotate your upper body, your torso in a passive way that your lower half is delivering your upper half. It makes it far easier to stabilize, swivel that front side, stabilize it, um, and keep it in front. So
Mhm.
that's usually where my brain goes right away is if that thing is getting outside the frame of their body or it's far too active, they've either been coached to do that, which means, okay, we're going to have to break a bad habit, or there's an inefficient movement going on from a force output standpoint that I want to attack. And usually that's going to be, again, go through the regression analysis of timing first, then I'm looking at balance and posture. If all things check out, I'm going to go right to that rotation and kinematic sequence world. And if I can make that rotation a little bit more efficient, maybe it's, making sure we're not throwing till the front foot hits. I find that front side's a little bit more passive. Um, that's a little easier to slow down and keep it inside the frame of your body. I think that straight jacket drill is just a good reminder of like, it's easier to rotate and stop your chest on your target if your lower half and your hips are doing the right stuff. If that makes sense.
It does. So sounds like there's two categories of folks that might, let's say, not pass swivel yet. One category is it's a conditioning thing. They're not rotating efficiently. The other category is they've actually been taught to pull with the front side.
Yeah.
Let's assume most people in this class probably fall into the former category. They probably haven't been taught yet to pull with the front side.
Yeah.
But probably most of the people in this class probably are not, I would say, passing swivel yet. Most of the young pitchers and quarterbacks don't pass that one for a few years. So if you're a parent in this class or you're a young quarterback, what are some of the drills or like what are some of the first things you might suggest for people that know they need to work on swivel? Front sides outside of the four corners of the torso, maybe it's moving backwards at release point. Where might they start in terms of drills and exercises?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that, again, a general thought process when we were doing weighted balls, and Tom would echo the same sentiment. Anytime we were throwing weighted balls, we always put something in the front of our hand. We call it a front side facilitator. It was something always to remind us, especially if it's weighted, because if our hand starts moving and you feel that weight pulling, right, you're going to feel the effects of that. So we put a weighted ball on the front side hand as a way of facilitating the fact that it stays in front. Okay. Um, we also that's just an emphasis, right? We want to do that where we're keeping it. Sometimes we will like literally break down the delivery so that all of the rotation, everything's already happened. We're already just squared up to our target. And you're learning what it feels like to throw from this position without moving this at all. The more you rep it, the more you start to feel what it feels like when you square up to your target, that this is not moving, how to accelerate your arm. Forget about how we create ground force and torque and everything. Like I said, if there's an issue that may be the torque part of it, well, let's take torque out and let's just feel what it feels like to throw with our front side firm, right? Um,
So,
another,
so just to try to summarize that drill, might be put a facilitator, as you said, in the front arm, like a weighted ball or something like that. You could even square up to the target, just like I'm squared up to the camera here, and basically just throw from here, keeping this very
correct,
steady.
correct. And just pay attention to how stable it is and realize that your arm path can be very natural from there. Another thing that we do, again, because we believe, call it blocked training, right? Take out certain variables so we can control it a little bit more. And then you give an athlete a sensation of doing it right, but also like, okay, I can do that. It just, I got to limit some variables first and then slowly implement all those variables back in. We do a lot of stuff on our knees, throwing from our knees, where, all right, our hips are already square to our target, right? That's where my front side's going to want to end up eventually when I torque to throw. Again, shorten the movement. So now we're creating positive sensations of, all right, I've got my front side in front, but again, I'm limiting. There's no hitching, there's no footwork, there's none of that. Towel drill is another great one because if you have negative head movement or your front side's flying, you're going to miss your target with the towel. With the football, we do it, similar to baseball. It's 5 feet off the landing leg, and you hold the glove. We hold a football 3 feet off of the landing leg. Um, when they take their stride, it's 3 feet, and then one more foot, and you hold the ball over that fourth step, basically. So it's 3 feet away. And we do that about eye height. Try to get a feel for like where their release point is. But again, if you start seeing that front side moving or getting outside the frame of the body, they're going to miss that target with the ball.
Mm.
Um, straight jackets is another one from an efficiency standpoint. Rotation, it teaches you kind of how to rotate in sequence, which then keeps us in control, which allows our front side to stay passive, gives you a far better chance to keep everything inside the frame of your body, because we don't continue to rotate on straight jackets. It's efficiently moving our chest towards our target, stopping it there. And again, feeling that, well, just so happens that one of those hands is also your front side facilitator. So, uh,
Mhm.
there's those things. I think for coaches, you got to identify sometimes, because I've seen guys where this gets outside the frame of their body, but it's not necessarily active, right? If it's active, meaning pull, yank, right away we gotta fix the rotation side of that. We got to get them the sequence better. But other times it's just, again, it could be direction. Sometimes you fly open to try to get yourself open to a target. That's not necessarily for pitchers. Well, I guess it could be for pitchers, but for quarterbacks, for sure. You start seeing the front side outside the frame of your body and it's active, just could be their alignment's not very good, right? So you want to check to make sure, all right, is his alignment good, or is it flying open because he has to get his body so far outside the frame of in which the target line in which he created? Then that's another whole thing. So
That might
uh,
be more of a, that sounds like a direction thing based on.
yeah, that's more in the direction world. You know, again, defining simple stuff for quarterbacks is tough because of how many variables fly. But if you can isolate some things, like I said in the beginning, like learning how to throw with the front side in front and just that feeling, load the scap and throw from right
Hmm.
here without moving that front side. I think it's always a good thing to work.
That's a great simple drill. I want to go back to what you said about the towel drill too, just because I'm guessing everybody in the class is familiar with the towel drill and has probably done it. So let's make sure they're doing it right. So
Sure.
for pitchers, they would put a target, usually somebody's glove, kind
Yeah.
of waist high out in front of the pitcher, and have them. You're kind of swatting down with the towel in order to reach it. For quarterbacks, you're saying it's more face level, so that
It's
you're
going to be higher because we don't want them losing any posture to pull down. So, uh, having a kind of, because it does matter the arm angle a little bit. Some guys come from a different side. It's not, again, pitchers, it's different, but yeah, we're working like eye height to somewhere in that face region to make sure. I mean, some guys who are way over the top, you might have it a little bit higher, but it's about getting to full extension, right? The same rules in baseball where we're trying to get to full extension, efficient movement without our head or our front side pulling out, because that's going to tell us right away some inefficient movement is taking away from release point.
right. Okay. That's the towel drill. I got to ask you about one other drill that maybe to some folks might seem relevant to fixing sort of the torque and kinematic sequence issue. A very famous drill of your all's, which is the DAC dance. Could that
Yeah.
be relevant here, and sort of just like making sure the body's moving in the correct sequence?
Yeah, I mean, that's our first drill we do every day outside of weighted balls. We talk about, call them QB walks, or that it got famous with the DAC dance thing. That's all about uh some people love to look at that drill and explain what's wrong with it, but I think they miss the boat on why we're doing it. We're just training our body to have our hips go first and our upper body not go anywhere with it. That's really all it's about. Yes, we're working on some other load, and the way Dak does it is how it makes sense for him. He's a big ball of muscle, and he likes to be violent with it, and he likes to move, and he likes to work on his tilt. I watched something the other day revolving about Tiger Woods, And it was, again, I go back to golf, but it was so prevalent to like when you're working on movement patterns, they talk about overemphasizing certain movements. Is that what your stroke's going to look like? No, it's not. But we're overemphasizing something so that if we can tap into just that feeling, it's going to lead to a more efficient delivery. Like, yes, Dak looks very violent when he's doing it and whatnot, but it helps him get loose. It helps him remind his body, like, hey, hips first, then upper body, hips first, because he's tight. He's just a naturally muscular, tight individual. So for him to let his hips, do the work from the ground up and his upper body to stay passive and patient, that's how he does it. Matt Ryan does it a little bit differently. Like,
Mm.
everybody does it a little bit differently. Long as those hips are moving and the upper body staying neutral, that's all we're really caring about. So yeah, for sure. That and then it steamrolls into the straight jacket movement. That's where we're throwing with no arms. It's the QB walks to straight jacket. That's where we're actually moving our torso and squaring up to our target.
Cole, can we see the straight jacket video one more time that you pulled up, just so people have that in mind, that as Adam's talking about it? Yeah, there it is. Perfect. So, okay, so we've already done our DAC dances. Now we go into these straight jackets, and Adam, maybe as we're looking at this, you could just talk about what the shoulders are doing going into release point.
Yeah, I mean, again, I remember this day, it was a lot about achieving direction, right? Making sure that his alignment was good, that his target line was there, that he had no negative head movement, and that his front side was staying passive into foot strike. So, and then again, the last part of it is that, okay, I'm trying to throw, I think we're probably throwing a 5 yard out there. Am I getting my chest to the outside of him? Am I rotating efficiently? Is my posture staying neutral? Is there this kind of low to high feeling? Pitchers go downhill, right?
Mm.
Quarterbacks, sometimes it's almost as if they're throwing uphill because they've got knee flexion and they have to be able to throw over linemen. So we need to be at our tallest point. Um, with Andy, we were working on, all right, he has great hips. He's got a very natural delivery. It was about, is my direction good? Am I squaring up to my target at the end? Making sure he's not over rotating and making sure he's at his tallest point when that ball's coming out, which you can see what he's working on: direction, hips delivering shoulders, chest to target, finishing tall over my front knee. All those things, back foot on the ground, obviously, right there. But yeah, I mean, that's what we were working on that day.
Awesome. Okay, so for folks, again, we're talking about folks that are not passing swivel. Check how you're doing in the app. See if the front side is within the four corners of your torso. See from the side angle whether it's pulling backwards in relation to something in the background. If swivel's an opportunity for improvement for you and it's not something you've been taught to pull, then you might start with DAC dances. You might go into some of those straight jackets. And then from there, Adam, they might do some of the drills you talked about with a weighted ball in the front arm where they're throwing with just squared up to the target, very stable front side. And then maybe from there go into some of the towel drills.
Yeah, towel drills and I mean, for fun one time, because we had somebody who has an active front side, uh, and it started off as a disaster, and then it slowly got better, believe it or not, was we put a cup of water in his hand, and he had to hold it in front and not spill the water, just so that he could learn how to throw with a completely passive front side. First day, there was water going everywhere. But slowly, and again, you start at a low intensity and you slowly pick up intensity. Like, he kind of learned how, man, I really got to keep this thing stable. And you start to learn how you generate power efficiently. Have I done that a lot? No, I just thought it was a fun drill to try. And, for the adults who do this occasionally, they might have a beverage in their hand while they're outside playing catch with the football. It's not completely unknown, but you can kind of picture how that goes.
Relevant for later in life, perhaps. Yeah. Well, I think we should launch, we like to launch these challenges in Discord. Steve Tarkos looks around. I think we'll launch the water spill challenge.
Yeah.
You got to wear like nice clothes and do it with Gatorade in your
Yeah.
front arm.
There's some pressure there for sure.
Yeah, well, that's pressure to it. I like that. Another minute here if anybody has questions they want to put in the chat. But if not, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up in future weeks. So today, swivel. Next week, we're getting into torque retention. The week after that, we've talked a lot about torque retention already tonight, so I won't preview that too much more. Week after that, we're going to talk about stack and track. Adam, maybe you could just give us a quick definition of stack and track. We've sort of hit on it with the straight jacket drills a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean the stack and track part, and it's been brought up before, and swivel kind of falls in the same category because it's happening around the same time. But man, stack and track again for quarterbacks, you know, a big thing we talk about is just posture at the end, because with quarterbacks, I'm sorry, with pitchers, you're working downhill, and for sure you're trying to like arch your back, keep your chest up for as long as you possibly can. Similarly for quarterbacks, in terms of being at our best posture when the ball's coming out, being able to throw over people, it's such an important part of something that we look at, that like, hey, and not to mention when you have to move suddenly to avoid linemen, or defenders, and then throw over guys, where posture and that stack and track part of the delivery becomes so important, for sure. And then not to mention, it's probably one of the best things for us in terms of accuracy. I've seen guys who maybe weren't necessarily the most efficient spinners of the football, but could still be accurate because they were very good at tracking towards their target. They understood, I got to get my body going, regardless of what. If I throw a perfect spiral, I know I can be accurate if I'm tracking towards my target. So another huge one for accuracy, and posture, and it kind of falls in that swivel category that is going to be important for sure.
Awesome. And then after that, we'll do a wrap up week, talk a little bit more about some general quarterback learnings, sort of more field management, reading defenses, things like that. That'll be the week of May 23rd. With that, Adam, thanks for doing this. As always, appreciate it. Congrats again on a huge week last week. Ridiculous week. Congrats.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll see you next week.